Good evening, race fans, and welcome back to Season 9 of the Attrition Sim Race Campus Oval Series. Tonight, our drivers have taken a little bit of a road trip from our past 6 rounds all along the East Coast, especially up in the Northeast, all the way on out to Irwindale, California, for 100 laps tonight here at the Irwindale Speedway. Going at half a mile or zero point 0.8 kilometers in length, this is a little bit of one of the longer speedways that we've gone to this season, but it's not the longest. But what it might just be, it might just come in as the widest. There is a whole lot of room for drivers to work with around this speedway, and I would imagine we are going to be seeing a whole lot of different lines taken around here in these low-powered street stocks. This is a track we've only been to once so far in the entire history of the Attrition Sim Race Campus Oval Series. Mind you, we've been going on for 9 seasons, and this is only the second ever time that this track has made an appearance. The first time being all the way back as the season opener of Season 7, the first ever broadcasted race of the ASRC Oval Series, and the first ever broadcast I had ever done since starting doing the broadcasting on iRacing. So this is a track that has a little bit of a special place in my heart, and I think that tonight we are going to be having some very exciting racing going on here. That said, if you want to come out and race with Attrition Sim Race Campus, be sure to check out at ASRC Racing on Twitter.com or head on over to www.asrcracing.com. Only requirements to join the league is to be a clean and respectful driver, and that's about it. Session opens 9 p.m. Eastern, hour of practice, 10 minutes of qualifying, and then at 10:10, drivers start making their way down to the starting grid, and look at that. That is where our drivers are heading right about now. So let's take a quick look down there at our starting lineup and see just how things are going to be kicking off here this evening for round number 7 of the Attrition Sim Race Campus Oval Series here tonight. Starting out on the pole for the Droppin' Bombs Racing team, that is the number 11 of Tyler McCrae, bringing in a new paint scheme here this evening, driving for the Sukup Foundation. The Sukup Foundation, of course, being for his teammate starting in P number 2, the 145 of Travis Sukup. I'm not going to tell you what the Sukup Foundation is about. I will allow Tyler to have the honor of doing that when we end up interviewing him next, which may or may not be tonight, but I feel like he will do a lot more justice with it than I will be able to. Starting back in P number 3, gonna be the number 93 of Jason Gardner, league admin, rolling off of the final stop position of the podium here tonight. Back in P number 4, that's 4-time champion number 85, Brian Zabelski, driving that orange and white Club West racing entry. Back in 5th, the driver of the number 70 machine, that's Jason Mong, driving the IROC entry, coming all the way back from, I believe, the 80s with that entry. Series that is long since gone, but not forgotten. Fittingly to his outside in the number 72, that's another sponsored car, but supposedly it's coming from the Trans Am Racing Series. Another one that was really big back in that era, not so much anymore, but at least it is still around. But apparently we got 2 street stocks out here tonight from pretty notable real-world racing series. Then finally rounding out row number 4, the 337 of Bill Watkins rolls off 7th for Dirt Bike Racing. And rounding out the field, the 007 of Nico Morelli, driving the Attrition Sim Race Campus, number 007. 8 cars going to be making the field here this evening. Pace car is off because this is a backstretch pit entry, so the drivers are going to have to negotiate themselves through turns 3 and 4 as they wait for the green flag to come out. And as they head into the restart zone, we're going to be really slow on the green flag, but the green flag is up. Green flag up in the air. 100 laps on the docket here this evening, and already a little bit of trouble. Drivers nearly going 3 wide back in the back here. Jacob Houston getting a bit loose off the corner in that number 72. He's keeping it rolling, but that was enough to startle drivers just a little bit. And up in the lead, we've already have a pass for the lead. McRae and Sukup battling it out. Sukup stuck up on the high line. McRae down low, side by side, out of turn number 3. 2 laps into this race, and these two drivers are battling out like we're at the final 2. Still side by side, heading down the front stretch. So it does look like Travis Sukup is going to have the advantage here. He is going to be taking the lead in that number 145, but McRae comes back into the action. He's not giving up that easily in this battle. He's going to send it on down low, but will he be able to make the pass? Irwindale is a track that, generally speaking, we see the high line be where all the speed is at. But that is not necessarily going to be the case here this evening, as the street stock's a little bit lower powered cars, a little bit slower on average, and that allows you to kind of work with other parts of the track a little bit more. It looks like trouble. Jacob Houston has fallen back 6 seconds over the course of a single lap. It does not look like he crashed that number 72, but that's going to be bumping him way far back very early on in this race. Looking down at his car, it doesn't look like he has any visible exterior damage, but he is having a little bit of handling issues by the looks of things, so there could be something going on under the hood here that we aren't that aware of yet. Jacob Houston making his first start of the season in that Trans Am entry. He made a couple of starts back last season, back in October, but this is our first time seeing him out here in 2023. Always great to see drivers making their returns and their first starts of the season. Currently in round 7 of the season, so we will have to keep an eye on him and see how things play out. I don't think that there's enough time left in the season for drivers to really contend for the championship or anything like that, but either way, everyone here is here to have a little bit of fun, to have a little bit of racing experience under their belts, maybe learn a bit from one another, and maybe, just maybe, carve out a little piece of history in the ASRC stat books. As we round turns 3 and 4, that's going to be getting ready to put us 10 laps into this race. Still a long way left to go, but you can see drivers mostly spread out here. Everyone's starting to play a little bit nicer and get themselves maybe a little bit more patient and try and work on making the long run of this race be where the opportunities happen. Travis Sukup in the lead of the race, Tyler McRae back in P number 2. Then following that, going to be the number 93 of Jason Gardner starting in P number 3 and holding on to that podium pretty dang well. We have not been able to speak to Jason so far this season. Just been a rougher season for the driver, the number 93, so definitely great to see him up here in the podium and contending with those drop and bomb racing entries here in that number 93. Rocking the paint scheme we used to rock before I started broadcasting here at ASRC, all the way back in 2021 when we were teammates out here in the Oval Series, rocking the paint scheme that we used to drive all the way back then. So definitely a little bit of nostalgia seeing it back out here this evening. And then following back behind him, number 85 of Brian Sabelski, who's getting a bit of pressure from Nico Morelli. Morelli showed up to this race quite literally at the last possible second, no practice, and I don't think he was able to set a qualifying time here, and there he is in the top 5 and battling his way into the top 4 if he can just get the run he needs to get around Sabelski. Morelli, another driver we've seen a couple of times this season but not been able to talk to quite yet. We did manage to get a couple of interviews in with him last season back in the late model, but seeing him out here in the street stock, we did talk to him a little bit before the race came on, so it wasn't on the broadcast, but I did talk to him a little bit down in the paddock, and he did say the street stock is not a car he cares for. It's not a car that he particularly feels comfortable in driving. He's not a driver that he enjoys the handling of. But he's coming out here and he is making a pretty solid run, that number 007. That said, I might have jinxed him a little bit as he scrapes against the outside wall. But he's still having a pretty decent run here tonight. And of course, two dropping bombs races at trees, battling and out for the lead here again. And McRae and Sukup nearly making the pass down on the low line, but now duking it out side by side through turns 1 and 2. McRae getting a little bit loose off the corner, but he's still able to hold on to this battle. You can see it though. Down on the low line, able to get the advantage on corner entry and through the mid corner, but you're just able to accelerate so much more when you're running that high line that McRae is going to have a very difficult job actually being able to clear Sukup off of the corner. And that time by, Sukup pretty much had enough room to clear McRae there, but McRae immediately dove it back down, so it didn't make all that big of a difference. That said, McRae's not giving up. He is running this car as hard as he can and really just trying to make the low line stick one way or another. The big question, though, is will it work out for him in the longer run of this race? Because, simply put, running that low line is going to be eating up McRae's tires. He's having to put more force into the car to get it to rotate. And that is not going to be a good story for him if this race goes green for a long period of time. Now, of course, if we get a couple of cautions, he might not have to worry all too much about it. But with how things are going right now, this could hurt McRae's chances of winning in the longer run of this race. That said, Sukup tried the low line there, decided he did not like it. He jumped back on up in not even a single lap, only half a lap down on the low line, trying to decide that he maybe was not feeling that. And now both of them have a little bit of pressure to deal with just in front of them. That is the 72 of Jacob Houston. Both drivers going to have to figure out how they want to navigate this number 72, this lapped car. And it looks like both of them going to be heading down to the low line. Houston's going to move it on high and let these two drivers by, not wanting to get involved in their battle. A little bit of scrape against the wall for McRae there in that number 11, but he's still got it going. Now Gardner getting on by that 72, and Sabelski not too far behind. Morelli has fallen back a bit, though, in that 007. The gap has widened from himself and Sabelski, now a second between these two drivers as we cross the line and put 25 laps in the books here tonight. So already a quarter of this race taken care of, and Morelli has a bit of a scary sight in front of him. That number 72 of Houston is blinking just a little bit, having a little bit of technical difficulties. And that flashing you see of the 72 car on our screen is also what Morelli is seeing on board in his car. Let's actually take a ride on board with that 007 entry and see what he is seeing down there with the 72's connection issues here. Look at me setting up the pass there and diving it real down low, having to completely slam on the brakes to get the car to rotate at all. That car really not wanting to cooperate down there, but he makes the pass on Houston, and now he has an open track in front of him to try and catch back up to that 85 of Brian Sabelski. The gap has grown to about 1.3 seconds between the two drivers, so he's got his work cut out for him, but still plenty of time left in the race for these cars to start to wear down, and that's where these passes are going to start to get made here this evening. Back behind Morelli, that is the IROC number 70 of Jason Mong, currently fallen down one position from where he qualified. He started where Morelli was. Morelli got around him fairly early on in the race, and now he's in a little bit of a bubble, a 2.5 second gap between himself and Morelli in front of him. and a 5.5 second between himself and Bill Watkins behind him. Watkins being the last car on the lead lap right now. So things getting fairly spread out around the speedway. Watkins has his number hidden on the car, but on our registration sheet he is driving the 337, the Dirtbag Racing entry. Currently setting lap times about 0.2 of a second off of the pace, so that 337 not handling the way he wants it to be handling, but either way, he still does have a position under his belt, but he does have to be careful because the race leaders are about half a speedway back from him. So unless something changes here fairly soon, there could be risk of Watkins being the second car to go a lap down. Currently, closest battle on the speedway is for position number 3, the last podium spot between Gardner and Sabelski. Sabelski is setting slightly slower lap times than Gardner, but only by roughly 1,000th of a second. And you see these two drivers taking alternate lines from one another. And that time by, again, Gardner just a little bit faster, and it actually looks like he's running a somewhat lower line than Sabelski, which is really interesting to see because for the most part it has seemed like the low or the high line is the place to be. So seeing Gardner take that lower line and actually setting faster lap times than Sabelski, even if it is only by a couple thousandths of a second, it does seem that it is working out for him here this evening. Half a second between these two cars. Currently the only cars on the speedway that are within a second of each other. So everyone fairly spread out, and I would imagine most of these drivers are now going to start thinking, okay, maybe this is how things are going to continue to be when it comes to raw pace. So how am I going to pick up positions based on my pit strategy? Drivers are going to be needing to come down to pit lane at some point. And speaking of drivers coming down to pit lane, that's the 72 of Jacob Houston making his way on down. So just like that, the first driver on the field down to pit lane. Houston potentially looking to see if he can't short pit the field and maybe make up some ground that way in that 72. Looks like at least 2 tires is going to be the order for that driver. Will he be taking 4? Looks like he will be, though that will be all the tires available to Jacob Houston. He won't be able to take any more for the rest of the race, but he probably won't have to pit for fuel for the rest of the race either, considering how long he has spent in pits so far. So it does seem like Houston should be good to go on fuel for the rest of the race. That said, looks like he might be having a little bit of difficulty down in pit lane in that number 72. I'm not entirely sure what's going on with him. He might be having a bit of technical difficulties, either with the car itself or with the rig in which he is driving on, but he's got a whole lot of smoke down there. He's having a little bit of a party and his engine exploded. No more party for the driver of the number 72, and his crew is going to pretty much immediately tow him back into his stall. But with his engine blown like that, that is pretty much the end of the race for Jacob Houston, and sure enough, it looks like he is going to be retiring from tonight's event. He hasn't officially retired yet, but his car is off the speedway, so we'll have to see. I mean, I don't think it's physically possible for Houston to come back out here now that his engine's blown, but either way, he hasn't officially retired from the race yet, so you'll just have to see what things end up playing out for that number 72 machine. Either way, Sukup still in the lead of this race with a comfortable 1.7 gap between himself and Tyler McRae. For reference, drivers setting roughly 20-second lap times around this speedway, so call it 2/10 of the track is how far back McRae is from Sukup. Which doesn't sound like a lot, and looking at the speedway, that's roughly about maybe a third of a straightaway. It's a little bit of ground that McRae has to make up if he wants to catch up to his teammate. But as we near the halfway point, the opportunities to do that are going to become less and less plentiful, so it might all come down to just what these drivers have planned for their pit strategies. With one driver being off the track and presumably out of the race for the rest of the race, the chances of a caution coming out have been reduced pretty considerably, so looks like green flag pit stops is going to be the way to go for these drivers. It's just the big question of when they decide to do it. We have crossed the halfway point, so if drivers pit anywhere after this point in the race, they're guaranteed to have enough fuel to the end as long as they don't underfuel their cars. But the pit window is officially open. It's just a matter of seeing who decides to be the first taker here tonight. Fairly spread out all around the speedway. Looking down at the pit cameras here, you can see most of the field has a pretty equal gap between each other. 1.5 seconds, 3 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, 2 seconds, and then 7 seconds. So yeah, looks like most of the drivers around the track are fairly evenly spread from each other, and Brian Sabelski is actually going to be the driver that makes the first stop down on pit lane in that number 85. Coming down on lap number 51, he's going to be our first taker this evening. And will it pay off? Will Sabelski, being the first pit, be able to make this work for him? Sabelski does look like he will be taking 2 tires. That will looks like it's going to be putting him a lap down. Sure enough, it is. And Watkins also going a lap down, getting passed by our race leader out on the track. And now Nico Morelli is coming down to pit lane in that 007, second taker of the evening. That is the 007 of Nico Morelli. So that's going to be 2 drivers down to pit lane, 2 drivers seeing if they can't get a leg up on the Droppin' Bombs racing team by stopping earlier than them and then passing them when they inevitably come down to do their pit stops. That said, Sabelski is 2 laps down from that pit stop. He did do a 32-second stop actually in his box, so it looks like Sabelski might have actually taken 4 tires, because Morelli is coming out too in that 007, and he only stopped for 12 seconds, and we know he took at least 2 tires, so sure enough, it does look like Sabelski took 4 tires, and that's why he's being scored 2 laps back right now. So now he has to play the waiting game and see, will our race leader of Sukup and his teammate of McRae also do the 4 tire play, or are they going to stick it out with 2? Now, a track like this, and it looks like Morelli's back in his pit box. Sure enough, Morelli, he's coming back out now. It looks like Morelli might have underfueled his car on the first stop and had to bring it back down, because Morelli spent almost a minute and a half down on pit lane there, so it looks like he might have underfueled the car and had to make another pass through pit lane to make sure he had enough to get to the end here tonight. So that's going to bump him back to the 7th position here this evening, and he's potentially at risk of going down a 3rd lap here as Mr. Travis Sukup catches up to him. That said, Morelli is on newer tires, and it looks like Morelli's actually pulling away from Sukup just a bit. Sure enough, Morelli is pulling away from the race leader, so not going to be going 3 laps down quite yet. 60 laps in the books. Sukup still out in the lead with a pretty comfortable gap. Then McRae about, call it maybe 2 corners behind Sukup. And then that 93 of Jason Gardner. And then a 14, or actually 9-second gap from Jason to Jason, Gardner to Mong, from 3rd to 4th. 62 laps in the books here this evening. Everyone pretty much just playing it safe now, waiting to hit the fuel number they need to be at to be comfortable to come down pit road, and then letting their respective strategies play out. Unless a caution comes out and majorly stacks up this field, everyone has pretty much resigned themselves to doing what they can to win on strategy and not raw pace, because with how spread out everyone is right now, most drivers don't have very good chances of actually catching up and passing the car in front of them right now. Gardner out in P number 3 right now is actually the only driver on the speedway who is still in the position that he qualified in. Of course, some drivers have gone down pit lane, and that has jumbled things around a little bit. But either way, that 93 car started in 3rd place and is still running in 3rd place. He is the only driver on the speedway that is able to say that. And looking a little bit further back, a driver that should get a little bit talked about, that is the 337 of Bill Watkins, who is running all the way up against the wall. Not quite chastaning it, but definitely getting way up high in that number 337. Watkins is technically our most improved driver so far, our biggest mover of the evening as we get 2/3 of the way into this race. Watkins currently up 2 positions, which is not a whole lot, but that is a pretty big deal when there are only 7 cars on the track right now. So Watkins, as of right now, is currently the biggest mover here tonight. That said, closing in on lap 70 here, and Brian Zabelski and Nico Morelli, the only 2 drivers that have come down pit lane. So it looks like Sukup, McRae, Gardner, Mong, Watkins all running pretty much the opposite strategy of the 85 and the 007. Both those drivers pit all the way back on lap 51 and 53. And now we're here on lap number 70, and they still haven't come down. They may just be looking to run these tanks completely dry and just pit when they don't have any fuel left. Bill Watkins down on the apron. It looks like potentially a bit of trouble for that number 337. He is not up to speed right now. He's not going slow enough to bring out the caution, but sure enough, he's going to pull it on down into the pit lane entry. He is going considerably slower than the pit lane speed limit right now, so potentially some technical issues under the hood of that number 337, but he is bringing it on down for his pit crew to take a look at it. But the other alternative is that Watkins just missed pit entry, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and assume that's not what happened. He's got his car down on pit lane, though. They've got at least 2 tires being put on the right side of this car. Potentially going to be going for the 4-tire strategy, and looks like we may have lost communication with the driver of the 337. Let's check our pit lane camera here. Yeah, sure enough, we are not getting any response from Watkins here. It looks like Watkins may have just disconnected from the race. Let's break out the pit lane camera again. Let's bring it around here. Yeah, there is not a number 337 machine down on pit lane right now, so we may have just lost communication with the 337 of Bill Watkins. That's going to leave us 6 cars left running in this race, 4 cars on the lead lap. Technically, Watkins and Houston have not actually retired from the event yet. They have not called it quits per se, but I'm not seeing either of them having work done to their cars down on pit lane, so that might be both of them calling it quits here this evening. 25 laps left to go here tonight. Plenty of racing left to go, but Sukup currently stealing the show. He's got the gap up to 4 seconds now between himself and his teammate McRae, and while it's still over a second, Gardner is actually beginning to catch up to McRae. McRae's tires look like they may just be starting to fade. And actually, I'll let them cross the line and update it again, but that time by, Gardner set a faster lap time than McRae. Gardner is catching up to that number 11 at a rate of what some drivers may describe as a high rate of fast. Tyler McRae is letting off big time in that number 11. His lap times are... Last time by, he was almost a full half of a second slower than Jason Gardner. So McRae is either going majorly into fuel saving mode in that number 11 right now, or he has completely burned the tires off of that race car, because both Gardner and Mong are both catching up to him considerably quickly, and Sabelski is there in the picture too, but he is currently being scored 2 laps down after his pit stop. So will we see Gardner attempt to go for the pass in these next 20 laps, or is he just going to be patient and try and get around McRae on pit lane? Last time by, McRae set a faster lap though, so it looks like McRae may have intentionally been lifting and coasting for those past couple laps to try and hit whatever fuel number he's going for right now on that 11. Because he is still setting competitive lap times. Actually, last time by, he was considerably faster even than Sukup, almost half a second faster than Sukup last time by in that 11. So he's definitely got speed under the hood of that machine still by a long shot. So I guess that really was just him having to lift and coast to try and get his fuel savings to where he wanted to be for whatever strategy he is currently running. 17 laps left to go though. There is not a whole lot of time for these drivers to actually come back down pit lane. Sabelski and Morelli both 2 laps down, really just waiting for everyone to come on down and get their pit cycles out of the way so that they can get back on the lead lap. But that does leave a really big what if, especially if a caution were to come out right now, because if a caution were to come out right now, Mong would get the lucky dog and be put back on the lead lap. Sukup, McRae, and Gardner would be able to comfortably come down pit lane without any issue. And that would leave Sabelski and Morelli both trapped 2 laps down with no way to recover in the final 15 laps in the race. So for Sabelski and Morelli, all they can do right now is hope and pray that a yellow does not come out before our race leader takes his car down to pit lane. 14 to go now. Travis Sukup sailing away with this race. He does not have a single thing to worry about in that 145. A whole 5 seconds of lead. And last time by, he was the only driver on the track to set a lap time under 20 seconds with a 19.91. Not as fast as the driver's fastest lap times, though. The fastest lap of the race still goes to Sukup. It was a 19.61. Then McRae and Gardner are tied with 19.65 as their respective fastest laps. And then it looks like Mong's fastest lap is a 19.78, Sabelski a 19.67, and then Morelli a 19.65, and Watkins a 19.95. So a fairly close cluster of best lap times here this evening. Everyone setting some pretty good speeds around the track. And again, last time by, Sukup the only driver on the speedway to set a lap time below 20 seconds with a 19.98. As he comes around the speedway and around out of turn 4, once again, double high five is going to go up in the air. 10 laps to go here this evening, which is a bit of a scary sight to see considering that none of the drivers in the top 4 have come down pit lane yet. And that raises the question, do all 4 of these drivers feel confident that they have enough fuel in the tanks to make it to the end of this race? Because we have seen a couple of races be decided by drivers not getting their fuel calculations right and running out of fuel on the last couple of laps. So that is the big what if for everyone around the speedway right now. Did these drivers do their math right? Did these drivers hit the numbers that they needed to hit to bring their cars home without having to pit? 8 laps left to go. If anyone wasn't careful, we might start to hear some sputtering in the next couple of laps. And if we hear that, that is going to spell disaster for the drivers in the top 4 positions of tonight's race. But right now, looking down at the 93 Jason Gardner, and it sounds like everything is good in the hood of that number 93. It doesn't sound like he's having any sputtering going on right now, so he might be feeling pretty good about hitting his fuel number. Same with Tyler McRae. No signs of anyone running out of fuel quite yet, so it is entirely possible that these drivers have hit the numbers they need to hit. After all, last time we were here at Irwindale, we saw drivers with really unorthodox pit strategies making things work out for themselves. Johnny Bell actually is not the best example for this. Johnny Bell made it within 5 laps to go without pitting and then ran out of fuel within 5 laps to go, had to bring it down pit lane to get that splash of fuel. And to add insult to injury, he ended up getting a penalty for speeding on pit lane. So that was a little bit of a disaster story for the driver of the 27 that unfortunately we have not seen in 2 seasons now. The driver that has pretty much been in charge of the league for the past 3, maybe even 4 years now, and even if he's not able to come out and race with us anymore, he is a driver that we all hold very close in our hearts for his contributions to Attrition Sim Race Campus. That said, double hockey sticks up in the air, 2 laps to go, and no one in our top 4 has come down pit lane yet. These drivers might just have saved enough fuel to make it to the end without having to do a pit stop. Sukup driving pretty comfortably in that 145, white flag up in the air. Does he have enough under his hood to make it around these last 4 laps? Heading down to turn 1 and 2. I'm not hearing anything wrong with the hood, under the hood right now. And sure enough, coming around through 3 and 4, Travis Sukup, 100 laps without having to come down pit lane in that number 145. He's going to get it done here this evening. Tyler McRae bringing home P number 2. Jason Gardner rounding out the podium. And that's going to bring Jason Mong drifting through turn 4. He's going to bring it home P number 4. Then Sabelski, not even going to bother, just bringing it on down pit lane. And that's going to bring Travis Sukup on down to collect his 5th checkered flag of season number 9. I said, don't go anywhere, race fans. We will be back in just a minute with interviews with your top 3 finishers here this evening. Don't go anywhere, race fans. We'll be right back. Alrighty, race fans, welcome back to the Irwindale Speedway, that number 145 of Mr. Mike Sukup, back down in victory lane to collect his 5th checkered flag of the season. Mike, evidently you had a fuel number in mind that you were wanting to hit, and you hit it. How are you feeling now that everything's done after 100 laps here out in California?
Pretty lucky. I think I ran out of gas on right at the checkers.
Well, that gives us 2 races back to back where drivers have been close to running out of fuel in the last couple laps of the race, but looks like everyone in the top 4 made it work out for them. So all y'all did a really good job making the fuel strategy work out for you. And now here you are with a 5th win to your name and probably another nice little bonus in the championship standings to further accentuate your lead here tonight. Next week, heading into, I believe, the Southern National Motorsports Park. How are you feeling about that one as our championship leader for round number 8?
Oh, pretty good. I like that track. It's a lot of fun. I'm not that I'm not fast at it. I enjoy that track.
Well, sometimes having fun is the key to success, so maybe you'll be picking up a 6th win to your name heading into next week. That said, McRae still pretty dang close to you in terms of points. Have y'all been having any particular feelings towards each other, knowing how close it is between you two for the championship title this season?
Oh, pretty competitive. I mean, I thought he was going to get me. I think he had the better car. I think he just tore his tires up going, but he's a hard person to beat. He's pretty smart too. He knows how to work the pits and everything. I think he's going to stop helping me.
Well, sad to see teammates start to turn into rivals, but also I love the competition and I look forward to seeing what both of y'all are able to bring in to next week, heading all the way back to the East Coast. Quite the road trip. Thankfully, y'all don't actually have to make the drive in real life. Of course, before I let you go, celebrate getting a 5th win to your name in that 145. There, one you want to thank for getting you up here with another checkered flag?
I want to have to thank the I thank the series. This has been a lot of fun, but I'd like to thank Tyler as he without him I'm kind of clueless. So he's still actually kind of babysitting me through this and making me a little better.
Good deal. Well, thank you for coming out, and I look forward to seeing you next week.
All right, man. Appreciate what you do.
And looking at the radio, it does not look like we've gotten Mr. Tyler McRae to be able to pick up quite yet. So, jumping straight back to P number 3. Jason, it's good to finally have you back up here in the booth again after quite a little hiatus of being able to talk to you, but you finally got another podium to your name. How are you feeling now that everything is said and done here in California?
Yeah, it's been way too long since I got a top 3. Every time it feels like I always get a chance, it seems like bad luck would just rear its ugly head at me. But yeah, today's race, it was definitely challenging. It was even if even with the setup I had, it was hard to keep the car balanced. So either want to push up to the track or back and felt like was coming around all 100 laps. I was all on my toes.
Yeah, we saw a couple of drivers this week get pretty squirrely throughout that race, but still no cautions, which is always great to see. And one way or another, you managed to bring it home in the top 3. Looking like going into this race, you were 5th in the championship standings, pretty close behind Brian. Brian finished back in 5th. So that's going to close the gap between you two pretty considerably heading into Southern National next week. How are you feeling about going back to Brazelton, Georgia for round number 8?
I feel pretty good. I'm actually going to use this momentum, hopefully, to give me another top 3 finish and closing the gap on Brian. Because yeah, the even though I'm within reaching distance of Brian, he is definitely one tough person to actually beat in the points.
Yeah, 4-time champion is no laughing matter, but looking at how things have been going, I think that it is very much a possibility for you to be able to pull it off. Of course, still plenty of time left in the season to see just how things play out. But for tonight, before I let you go and celebrate getting back up on the podium, anyone you want to thank on the side of that number 93 for getting you up here?
I do like thank Tyler. He actually gave me the initial setup and to work with, and I started tweaking with it all practice long. And I actually like to thank of you because I mean we've been trying to get people to broadcasting. You've been broadcasting for the last what is it, 3 seasons?
Yeah, this is season number 3.
Yeah, so I'd like to give one big thank you to you, and I actually want to give thank you to everybody who actually participates in the Oval Series, because if it wasn't for them, the series would not exist.
Yeah, always great to have folks coming out every week and putting on such a great show, and always exciting to see just what y'all have in store every Monday night. Of course, thank you for coming out, Jason, and as always, I look forward to seeing y'all next week.
All right. Hopefully, I'll see you next week. And I actually do want to give a little shout out to the person in chat, because I've noticed that every week they'll cheer for me, so I like to give them a little shout out.
Good deal. Well, I'm pretty sure that their direct messages on Discord are at the very top. So if he didn't hear that, then I'll be sure to let him know in his messages.
All right.
And let's see, looking at our chat, it does not look like we're going to be able to talk to Mr. Tyler McRae here this evening, which is unfortunate, but I'm sure the opportunity will arise again to hear from him. So before we sign off for the evening, let's take a look down at our race results. Travis Sukup going to be bringing on home another win in that 145. Win number 5 for that Dropping Bombs racing driver. Tyler McRae bringing it on home P number 2 in the 11, followed by Jason Gardner, who we just spoke to, rounding out the top 3. Back and forth, that's the 70 of Jason Mong, followed by the 85 of Brian Sabelski, rounding out the top 5. 6 going to go back to Nico Morelli in the 007, followed by the 337 of Bill Watkins back in 7th, and Jacob Houston in the 72, rounding out the 8-car field here this evening. Now, that's just about all we got for y'all here tonight here at the Irwindale Speedway. Of course, be sure to tune in same day, same time next week at the Southern National Motorsports Park for round number 8 of the season, 10 p.m. Eastern. And as always, thank y'all for coming out to the stream, and have a good evening, race fans.